Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kseniya. I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to fill out the form I-130 on paper. To find the form, first go to the uscis.gov website and click on this drop down that says Forms, and you will see in the Family-Based Forms column the Petition for Alien Relative. So it will take you to this page. You can either file this form online, which in my opinion is a lot easier, and I have a couple of guides on how to complete this form online. But if you choose to fill it out by paper, if you scroll down some more, in the drop down that says Forms and Document Downloads, you will find this form. You can fill it out in your internet browser, or you can download this form and edit it using the Adobe Acrobat Reader, which is what I personally recommend. The first thing I want you to pay attention to is the expiration date. Anytime you fill out the forms from the USCIS site, you should make sure that you're filling out the latest expiration as well as the latest edition that is available on their site. USCIS does update the forms every 6 months or so. If you submit the forms with the old expiration or edition date, they're likely to be rejected by USCIS. So, for the sake of time, if the form is updated, it is best to refill it to the latest version. You can skip this entire first part. This is not for us. And we will start right here. You can type in these forms, or you can use a black pen to fill it out neatly. I recommend typing it up. A couple of quick definitions. The person who is filling out this application is called the petitioner, so the US citizen or permanent resident. And then the person who is your relative, whom you would like to immigrate to the US, is called a beneficiary. So in part 1, you will be asked to identify whom you're filing this petition for: spouse, parent, brother, sister, or child. Let's, for example, say spouse, but throughout the form, I will also give examples if you are filling out for other relatives. You will only answer question 2 if you are filing this petition for a parent or a child. So if you're filling out this petition for your spouse, you can leave question 2 blank. If you are filling out for your brother or sister, you will answer question 3, but if you're filling out for your spouse, parent, or child, leave question 3 unchecked and answer question 4. Did you gain your lawful permanent resident status or citizenship through adoption? Answer yes or no. In most cases, it's a no. Next, provide your information as the petitioner. Provide your alien registration number. You will only have an alien registration number if you are the kind of petitioner who is a permanent resident or used to be a permanent resident and naturalized, if you were born in the United States, or if you acquired your citizenship through your parents. You do not have an A number. If a question doesn't apply to you, you can simply leave it blank, or you can write not applicable after you print out this application. In our case, our petitioner does not have an alien registration number. Next, provide the USCIS account number if you have one. You only get a USCIS online account number if you, as the petitioner, have ever filed any applications online. But also in that case, you probably should just fill out this entire petition from your USCIS account. And provide your US Social Security number. Next, provide your full name. Moving on to the next page. If you have ever used any other names, you can provide them here. So for instance, if you changed your name during naturalization process, indicate any other name you used here. Maybe if you are a woman and you're filling this out and you had a maiden name, you can also indicate it here. And if you run out of space, you can scroll all the way down to the last page and add any more names if you've ever used them before It does mention nicknames here, but they do not actually mean nicknames that your family or friends call you. This means any nicknames that you have ever used in documents or applications. Next, provide the place where you were born. And it doesn't ask for the state here, but you can provide it anyway in case your city or town has a very commonly used name. And the country of birth, as well as your date of birth and your sex. Moving on, provide your current mailing address. In care of name refers to anyone who is receiving mail on your behalf. If you are residing and receiving mail at your address, you can simply leave this entire first line blank. But let's say, for example, you are living in a place where it's not your official place of residence and you would like someone else, or maybe you live in an apartment complex that doesn't receive mail and you will provide your friends or your relatives' mailing address to receive mail from USCIS. In that case, you can write that person's name here and answer this question if your current mailing address is the same as your physical address. If you answer yes, in that case, the next section that asks for your physical address 1 can be left completely blank. This is asking for our address history for the last 5 years, whether inside or outside the US. And it's asking to provide your current address first. Because our mailing address is our current address, we're simply going to leave this section blank and move on to physical address 2. So this is the address where you lived immediately before your current address. And once you fill out this address section, provide the dates when you lived at this second to last address. So because this is asking for the last 5 years, and we still have not covered 5 years history, we are going to scroll all the way down to the additional information page and indicate our physical address 3 here to complete our 5-year history. This is asking for you to reference what page and part number and potentially item number you're referring to clarify or expand upon in the main application. So the address history was on page 2, part 2, and you can leave the item number blank. Let's say, for example, that this completes our 5-year history, but if you need to provide more addresses, you can continue to type in the same box here. You don't have to type into a separate box every time, especially for those of you who have a lot of address or employment histories we'll talk about later. In that case, you can, for example, move on and say something like physical address 4 and provide that information here as much as you can fit. Moving on to marital information. This question asks how many times you have been married, and this includes your current marriage as well. Let's say in our case it's 1, and provide your current marital status and the date of your current marriage. Provide the place of your current marriage. Next, provide the names of all your spouses. You first want to provide the information about your current spouse. And then if you have been married or divorced before, or even if you had any annulled marriages, you will need to indicate them here as well in your spousal marital history. And then this question asks date marriage ended. If you are currently married, you can simply leave this blank. Next, provide information about your parents, and it doesn't really matter what order you indicate the parents, full name, date of birth, sex, as well as where they were born and where they are currently residing. And if for some reason one of your parents is deceased, you will write deceased in this line. Provide the information on parent 2. So this is asking, by the way, for biological parents information. Unless you have been legally adopted, in that case, you will need to provide your adoptive parents information. Sometimes I get a question about if you are no longer in touch with one of your parents or you don't really know anything about them, should you still provide that information? And the answer is yes, you should still provide it to your best extent. So for instance, if you just kind of know the name of your parents, but then you don't know their date of birth, you can, after printing this form, write unknown, or you can leave this blank. Moving on, provide the additional information about petitioner, your status. Are you a citizen or permanent resident? If you are a U.S. citizen, you will be asked to indicate how you were able to obtain your citizenship, either by birth in the U.S., naturalization, or through parents. So in our case, let's say we were born in the U.S. It asks if you have obtained a certificate of naturalization or citizenship. If you naturalized, you should have a certificate of naturalization. If you got it through your parents, you should ideally have a certificate of citizenship, but in some cases, people don't. They just straight up apply for a U.S. passport. If you answer yes, you will then need to provide the certificate number and where it was issued. For naturalization certificates, the place of issuance is usually the place where you had your naturalization ceremony. So in our case, it's no. Moving on, answer questions 40A through 41 only if you are currently a lawful permanent resident. You'll need to indicate your class of admission. So this is not how you entered the US on what visa originally. This is asking for the alphanumerical code that is on your current green card. Date of admission is the date your green card was issued, and place of admission is where you received your green card. So this would be either the field office if you adjusted status, or if you, for example, were approved overseas, then here you can write the embassy. And then it will ask you if you got your permanent resident status through a marriage based case before. But again, because we are a US citizen, we don't have to fill out none of this. Moving on to employment history. This is asking for employment history for the last 5 years. Write in your current employer first. If currently you are unemployed, you will write unemployed. If you are a retiree, you can write retired and then indicate the date since when you were retired. Maybe you are a student, then you can just write student. If you write unemployed, student, or retired, you don't have to fill out the address. You will only need to fill out the dates. So fill out the name of the place where you work, their current address, your occupation, and when you started working here. And I do get a question about including gaps in employment. Generally, if the gaps are a few months, you definitely should be including them here. And then because we still have not completed our employment history for 5 years, we're going to scroll down to the last page again. And now in this box, we're going to provide our continued employment history. So that was on page 4. Part number 2, and again we're going to leave item number blank. We're going to write employer 3, and the same rule applies to the employment history as with the address history earlier. You can try to fit in more employment histories here, and any other gaps such as being a student, being unemployed, for example, things like that. And by the way, if you end up running out of space on this last page and you need to provide more information, you can keep making copies of this last page, or you can create your own Word document. But I personally find it easier to just keep making copies of this last page of the application and filling it out and then attaching it at the end of your application, as many as needed. Another question I get is, what if I currently have 2 jobs? So let's say, for example, you have this job, which says present over here and it's pre-filled. And if you have another job that you presently hold, then in employer 2, you can write that job here. And also, in that case, type in the date when you started it. But for the date 2, you can leave it blank and then in pen, write in present, or if your electronic browser allows you, write present in here. Moving on, provide the biographic information of the petitioner, your ethnicity, so select one of the boxes, your race, your height and your weight, your eye color, and your hair color. Moving on to part 4. Finally, here you will be asked to provide information about your beneficiary. Very likely, they're not going to have an alien registration number if they have never been to the US before, or if they're here on a non-immigrant visa, they probably don't have an A number. However, if your beneficiary is here on maybe like an H visa, any other visa, maybe they're here on asylum or another status like DACA, for example, then they probably do have an A number. So if they have one, indicate it here. If your beneficiary has an online USCIS account number, you can also provide it here. Keep in mind that this only refers to their own USCIS online account, not the account of the petitioner, and their social security number if they have one. Provide your beneficiary's full name. So because in our case, we are petitioning our spouse, then obviously the name of our spouse that we indicated earlier in the application will be the same as the name of our beneficiary, of course. And if your beneficiary has ever used any other names, provide them here. And let's say in our case, Jane used a maiden name before she changed it to her spouse's name. By the way, if you are filling out this application for your spouse, I do quite frequently get a question: are they allowed to write their new name, new married name, in these applications? And luckily, the answer is yes. So even if you don't yet have any official documents showing your spouse's last name, you can still go ahead and write in your new last name in all of the applications. And the way you write this name will also appear the same way on your green card. So if you would like your new married name to be on your green card, then fill out all the applications using your new married name. And even if in your marriage certificate they are still making you write your maiden name, USCIS will still allow you to change your last name in the applications, because in the marriage certificate, they will be able to see what your spouse's last name is. So if your name is spelled differently on different documents, maybe there's a difference of a few letters, then you will also need to indicate it here. Moving on, provide the beneficiary's place of birth and country of birth and their date of birth, their sex. And next, answer the question if anyone has ever filed a petition for this beneficiary. This includes petitions I-130 for family base, I-129F for fiance, I-129 for employment, and I-140 for employment. Humanitarian petitions such as I-134A do not count here. Moving on, provide the beneficiary's physical address. Let's say, for example, that our beneficiary is actually currently in the United States and she will be adjusting status. In that case, the beneficiary's physical address will very likely be the same as the petitioner's current address. And of course, if your beneficiary resides overseas, then this would be their current physical address. If your beneficiary is visiting you in the United States, but they're planning to return back to their home country to continue the process, in that case, their physical address would be the foreign address where they fully reside. Next, provide the address in the United States where your beneficiary intends to live. So because our beneficiary is already inside the US, we will simply write same. But if, say, for example, your beneficiary is currently overseas and in this portion you already provided their foreign address, then you will need to fill out this and provide their US address where they will be living with you, and most likely this will be the same address as the petitioner's current address. Next, provide the beneficiary's address outside the United States. If this address is the same as here, then down here you don't have to repeat this foreign address again. You can just type same. And the way that you would write this foreign address, you can quite literally put it in the same format as the foreign address and simply just type it into English letters. And if this foreign address is too big and it doesn't fit on this page, you can either use the last page of this application to clarify what the full address is, or even better in my opinion, after you print this form out, you can neatly, in pen, in small letters, write out this address here. And then I also do get a question about beneficiaries who have been living in the US for the past decade or even 20 years, whether they should still be providing their foreign address here. And the general answer is probably no, because if the beneficiary has already been present in the United States for so long, they have established their residency here, even if it's not as a permanent resident, they still have been in the US for such a long time, they probably no longer have a foreign address, so then just leave this foreign address section completely blank. Next, provide your beneficiary's daytime phone number. You will notice that sometimes the form will not let you fill out the foreign phone numbers with special characters like the plus sign, for example. In that case, you can again leave this blank and then write it in pen after you print out this application. And provide your beneficiary's email address. Moving on, provide your beneficiary's marital information, how many times the beneficiary has been married. Again, this also includes current marriage. So in our case, our beneficiary has also only been married once, and provide the current marital status and the date of current marriage. Because we are petitioning our spouse, basically a lot of this information will be repetitive, where the marriage occurred. Next, provide the beneficiary's spouses and provide the information about the current spouse. Because our beneficiary is married to our petitioner, basically spouse 1 will be our petitioner. And because they are currently married, we're going to leave this line blank because their marriage has not ended. And if Jane has ever been married to anyone else before, then we'll provide the spouse 2 information here. Moving on, provide information about beneficiary's family. So this is asking to provide the information about beneficiary's spouse and children. So we will once again, person 1 will be beneficiary's spouse if beneficiary is currently married. We will once again type in John's name here because John is Jane's spouse. And if your beneficiary has any children, then the children will go in here. This doesn't only include biological children, this also includes stepchildren. And this includes children of any age. And keep in mind that you only type in the spouse if currently married. If you are filling out this application for your parents, for example, you will include the other parent, if they're still married, in here. And same applies to any children. You should be including your own name as well, because as a petitioner, you're still their child. So in this case, don't forget to include yourself as well. Moving on to beneficiaries' entry information. So if the beneficiary has ever been in the United States, this is not just asking if they're currently in the US, but if they have ever been here. Answer yes or no. And then if your beneficiary is currently in the United States, you will complete questions 46A through 46D. But again, only if your beneficiary is in the US right now. Our beneficiary is in the US right now. First, find the class of admission. So what visa did they arrive on most recently? Let's say, for instance, in our case, Jane arrived as an F1 student. Her I-94 record number, this can be easily located on the cbp.gov website. And you will notice that this form also may not allow you to type in the letters in the section. So let's say, for example, your I-94 has a letter in it. Then in that case, you can leave this blank. And in pen, after you print out this application, you can write in the I-94 number. Next, provide the date of arrival. Again, it is the most recent date of arrival on their most recent I-94. And when their authorized stay expired or will expire, as again shown on I-94. If they are a student, it's likely that their expiration is written as DS, duration of status. So as long as they're a student, they can legally stay here. So in that case, it will not let you type in the form DS, so you will write it in pen after you print out the form. Next, provide your beneficiary's passport number, even if they are not currently in the US, and provide the country that issued that passport. Travel document refers to something other than a passport. So, for example, border crossing card, in that case, this would be their travel document. Maybe they are a refugee or an asylee. In that case, they may have a special refugee entry document, and that considered a travel document, which you will type in here, and provide the expiration date. And by the way, if your beneficiary arrived to the United States a long time ago and they're still in the United States and the passport that they used for entry to the US expired and perhaps they renewed their passport, you should still be inputting the passport details of the passport that they last used for entry to the United States, even if it is expired. And you would do the same actually in all other applications, such as their adjustment of status and their I-765 application, for example. They will be running the background checks and they will be checking the entry information based on the passport that was last used for entry. If your beneficiary doesn't yet have a passport, say for example they are overseas and they will be doing consular processing, that's totally okay. You do not have to include that information on the I-130. However, keep in mind that by the time their case gets to the NVC, they should have a valid passport because they will not be able to proceed to their green card application without inputting their passport number. Next, provide beneficiaries employment information. Let's say, for instance, that Jane is actually currently unemployed. You can then leave the rest blank. Next, additional information about beneficiary if they have ever been in immigration proceedings. So immigration proceedings refers to these proceedings: removal, rescission, exclusion, or other judicial proceedings related to immigration. So it doesn't mean if you have ever applied for other visas, things like that. No, it only refers to these types of proceedings. Moving on, information about beneficiary in their native written language. And you only need to provide this if your beneficiary's native language doesn't include Roman letters. So Roman letters are English letters, like Europe, a Latin American, Central American country. In that case, you can skip this whole section. But if your beneficiary's native language is Russian, like in our case, or Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, Hebrew, all of those characters that don't look like English letters, you will need to fill out these questions. It will not let me type the country in the native language, so I'll just write it in English. But this is what it would basically look like, something like this. This is especially necessary for beneficiaries who are currently located overseas. Moving on. If you are filing for your spouse and only for your spouse, you will need to provide the last, which means the most recent address where you lived together. Because in our case, Jane and John are living in the United States, then their current mailing address, once again, will be their address where they have most recently lived together and when they began living here. And if they are currently residing at this address, then we're simply going to leave the date to blank. This part of the application is very important. I cannot emphasize enough how important these questions are in the application. I want you to remember one thing when filling out this form. Only answer to one of these two sections, either 61A and B or 62A through 62C. Never ever fill out both of these sections and never leave both of them blank. This section is asking if your beneficiary will be applying for adjustment of status, which means they're currently inside the US and they will be filing the form I-485. This question is asking if your beneficiary will be overseas at an embassy or consulate. If you do not answer any of these questions, USCIS will retain your approved petition and will not let you move forward in your case unless you pay another rather high fee and fill out another form for them to transfer this petition to an embassy or consulate. And if you fill out both of these questions, this one and this one, USCIS will do the same. They need to know for sure whether or not they will be transferring your petition to a consulate overseas or whether you will be continuing with adjustment of status. In our case, Jane is adjusting status, so we will simply type in the field office location where Jane will have her green card interview or the field office next to her. Keep in mind that this is not the lockbox facility where you will be sending your case. This is the local office that will process your case. And if you don't know what your local office is going to be, simply write in the place where you reside right now. You can also double check what your field office will be by going to the USCIS site field office locator, typing in your zip code, and it will tell you what your field office will be, which you will type in here. If your beneficiary is outside the US, then here, write in the city or town and the country of where they will plan to have their consular interview. If your beneficiary is located in a country where there is no US embassy or the embassy is not working, it is most likely that you can type in another country where you would like to continue your process. But ultimately, it is up to the USCIS and up to the NVC to decide where they will send your case. You can then go through the NVC public inquiry form and request that they transfer your case. Moving on to part 5, it is asking if you have ever previously filed petitions for this beneficiary or any other beneficiary. Again, this refers to I-129F, I-130, I-140 petitions. And this section is asking if you are submitting separate petitions for anyone else at the same time. This I often see with petitioners who are sending petitions for both of their parents. So in that case, one of the I-130 petitions will be about one parent. So then here, you will type in the name of your other parent, or if you're petitioning your spouse and stepchildren at the same time, then you will provide this information here. And finally, moving on to the last few sections of this form, part 6 is where you will provide your contact information and indicate how you filled out this application. So if you understand English and filled out this form by yourself, then check box 1A. But if someone else translated the questions for you, you will check box 1B and type in the language that was used to interpret it for you. If applicable, you also can check box 2. So if someone else prepared this form for you, you will check it here and type in their name. If you scroll to the next sections, you will need to provide the names of those interpreters or preparers who prepared this for you. Then provide the petitioner's daytime phone number, a mobile phone number. If it's the same, you can leave it blank or simply repeat it, and petitioner's email address, signature, and date. So you can type in the date, but you must use ink, which means a black pen, to sign this petition if you're filing it by mail. And because we did not use interpreter or preparer, we're simply going to leave these sections blank. USCIS accepts blanks. You totally don't have to write NA in every line. And we have arrived at our last page, the additional information page. One note I want to make about this particular page is, like we said earlier, if you need to make copies, you can make copies of it. If you're using a separate piece of paper to provide additional information, you're going to have to write your name on each of those sheets and sign and date each of those sheets. This is only referring to any additional pieces of paper that you make yourself. If you continue to make copies of these additional informations, then you don't need to sign and date it, and you don't need to sign and date this one in this form. If you did not need this page to fill in any additional information, you should still attach it to your form. Every single page of the application must be included, even if you leave it blank. And you should still write your name on this page, even if you're not planning to utilize it. If you are wondering what kind of evidence needs to be provided with this form, I recommend that you check out the form instructions for this form, which can also be accessed right here where you downloaded the form initially. If you are filling out this application for your spouse, don't forget to also fill out the form I-130A, the supplemental information about your spouse beneficiary. I hope that you found this video useful. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!